Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. With the George Russell Max Verstappen beef at an all-time high after what's happened back in Spain, we return to Montreal, the scene where both of them effectively shared pole position with exactly the same lap time on the boards. Could we have another spectacular Russell-Verstappen battle this upcoming weekend? Russell certainly is not shy of giving his comments to Max, saying that if he was against Max at the same team or different teams in a very similarly performing car, he would absolutely not be afraid to take down Max as he did to Hamilton over his couple of years at Mercedes. That's Russell's perspective, controversial from top to bottom. Will we ever, however, get the Russell-Max Verstappen title fight that many of us are hoping for? Very much into your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Plenty to get into. We're going to start with the Montreal Grand Prix. This is the trophy for the Grand Prix weekend. As you guys can tell, pretty spectacular, not going to lie. Certainly better than some of the trophies that we have seen in recent times. And this is the new Haas livery. Well, look, it's a Haas, right? I mean, it's not really setting the world alight, but they've brought back a little bit of that grey that they used to be rocking back in the day. From this angle, it actually looks a bit more different, and if anything, a bit better, maybe you could argue, than the first angle that I showed you guys. But yeah, this is what the Haas are going to be rocking with this weekend. Whether they're going to be any good, I mean, they've had some decent Grand Prix weekends this season, but it's been incredibly hit or miss for them. Even from Australia, their car was nowhere. They didn't really know why. They've tried to bring some changes to correct that, but unfortunately for Behrman and Ocon, it's really just been all over the place this season. Maybe Montreal could offer an opportunity. It has, I will say, historically been a terrible Grand Prix for Ferrari. Certainly in recent years. Last year was horrific. And yeah, there's been some bad ones for the Scuderia and for Charles Leclerc, especially over the last couple of seasons. It is, of course, though, historically, one of Lewis Hamilton's best ever circuits. His qualifying record against teammates there is legendary. His amount of wins there, pole positions, etc. is also right at the top of the order, right? So we've talked about this in recent weeks, that if Hamilton is going to turn his form around, this is the stint where you would expect him to do it. Spain is a great track for him historically. Didn't really work out last weekend, but qualifying was pretty good. Okay, pretty good in the context of where Ferrari presently are. And then, you know, we've got Montreal, we've got Austria coming up, we've got Silverstone coming up. Like, it should be a strong period for Hamilton, but it's just historically, this has not been a strong period for Ferrari. And that is a serious concern. People are talking about the Cannes Grand Prix, or maybe for Ferrari it should be the Can't Grand Prix. We'll see this weekend what exactly that looks like. Especially when, you know, I know that Ferrari have been killing it with the social media game. We've seen plenty of it for the whole season. You know, Hamilton's aura farming before the season even started was, you know, it's classic Ferrari type stuff. But people are talking about, well, you know, why have we got this Leo fan cam? This is Charles Leclerc's dog. It's like, you know, the official Ferrari Twitter's pointing this out. It's like, look, guys, can we maybe make the car a bit faster? Maybe that's what the fans would prefer. But whatever. This is what Scuderia Ferrari are, baby. And even Charles Leclerc has at least been contemplating life beyond Formula 1. He did talk about this and effectively confirm, maybe for the first time, that he is going to be racing Le Mans at some point. Not yet, obviously. It is literally this weekend, clashing with Canada. But there is a possibility at some point in the future for a driver to do so. Maybe it would have to be, though, beyond their Formula 1 days. But as Leclerc says, Le Mans is definitely a place where you will see me race one day. There's been talk about it because Fernando wants to do it again. Obviously, Verstappen has made it very clear that he wants to do it. I wouldn't be surprised if we could get some sort of partnership like that in due course. But of course, that would mean that, you know, Leclerc would no longer be in Formula 1. And no longer with Ferrari, and both of those seem difficult things to imagine, although some may argue that Leclerc leaving Ferrari could be in his best interest at some point, but people are definitely disagreeing on that topic in general. This is talk on Arvid Lindblad. So he is the junior from Red Bull, possibly the most promising entirely in Formula 2 right now, even not just in the Red Bull stable. Certainly now Behrman and Antonelli have got their promotions. But Lindblad's done a great job in F2 so far. Promoted very early, but has already delivered poles, race wins in Formula 2, stuff like this for, I think he's driving for the Campos team, but effectively with a Red Bull livery on the car. He's been expected to be Red Bull's next star for some time, and there would be no doubt in my mind, and frankly no surprise, if they put him in a Formula 1 car next season. My question for you guys is, who is the driver under the most pressure currently at Red Bull? There's only two candidates, obviously. It's not Max, it's not Hadjar. It's either Lawson or Tsunoda, right? Because which way do you see it going? Let's say Lindblad is getting the promotion guaranteed. What do you do if you're Red Bull? Because you've got 4 seats, one of them needs to be replaced. So what are your options? Well, Max ain't leaving Red Bull unless he leaves himself. But, you know, you're not demoting him to RB unless you think somehow that's actually a faster car in his hands, which, let's be real, it's not. Do you put Hadjar to the Red Bull? That's probably question number one. If he continues his great form, obviously you can justify doing so, but you might argue, given historically drivers with, 20 or so races in Formula 1 before they go to Red Bull doesn't really go to plan so well. We saw what happened with Lawson with even less experience than that. So you might argue, if you're Red Bull, that you should give Hadjar another season at the junior team. We'll see, I guess. I mean, it's a big adaptation for 2026 anyway. Could be a potential reset. But if Hadjar's so good that he becomes kind of undeniable, and let's be honest, if Tsunoda doesn't improve dramatically, they will get rid of him, because as much as I like Yuki, they were going to get rid of him anyway. Like, if Lawson didn't collapse and crash and burn, and the engineers were convinced that his confidence was so shot that it was never going to happen for him, then Tsunoda would be driving around the sister team this year, doing, I imagine, rather well, and then being kicked out probably, because if he wasn't getting the promotion this year, he was never getting it, and he's finally got it. But if he doesn't deliver what Red Bull are hoping for, then, they will get rid of him, right? Now, they are going to stick with Yuki until the end of the season, per our understanding. They want to understand his feedback on the car, currently because of what happened in Imola with the crash. His car, at least until hopefully this weekend anyway, was not on the same upgrade level as we saw with Max's. That was affecting him certainly to some degree as well. And I still think Yuki has more potential in there, and even in this car, than he's shown so far. But we'll see, because if Yuki keeps doing what he did in Spain, then there's no way he's going to last, and he's going to have to find a drive somewhere else on the grid. We talked about Aston Martin, the Honda partnership being an option, but I'm not really sure how likely that is right now. So maybe it's an option to promote Hadjar. If you don't want to do that, maybe you keep Yuki in, you keep Hadjar at the sister team, and then you get rid of Liam Lawson, right? And you kick him out the team. I think one of those two will go for sure in place of Lindblad. The question, I think, is whether Hadjar gets the promotion or not, because I don't think Lawson's getting promoted again. I just don't see that happening. So I think the options are Lindblad gets the drive. Either you kick out Lawson and you put basically Lindblad straight into that seat alongside Hadjar and you keep Yuki, or you drop Yuki completely, you promote Hadjar, and then what do you do? Do you keep Lawson as well? Because Marco is a big Yuki fan, more so than Lawson for sure. Horner is more of a Lawson fan than he is a Tsunoda fan. So that's maybe where the internal power dynamics of Red Bull continue to play a factor. But let's talk about some other drama. Nico Rosberg was, let's just say, very vocal last weekend back in Spain. And I think that's great punditry, personally. Like, the point, I think, of being an analyst, pundit, whatever, is to spark some debate. Okay, if you're the lead commentator, as like the play-by-play commentator, your job is slightly different. But if you're on the broadcast and you're not stirring interest in talking points, then I don't think you're doing your job right. And that's why I think Rosberg is great at this, because he has no filter at all. So he talked a lot about the drivers and where teams and drivers were struggling, and said that Lando's lap from turn 1 onwards, he overdid it. He went wide, went offline, got extra snaps, and that resulted in 2 snaps down. And as we know, not being on pole, Piastri handled it well, won the race in pole position. Maybe if Lando had been on pole, it would have been another story entirely. But he also gave some further comments, Rosberg, on Norris's mentality. And I know that we talk about this a lot, but I think it's more relevant now than ever. Norris is in the mix of a title fight with the driver that he, I'm sure, thought going into the season he would have the measure of. But Piastri is effectively unflappable, incredibly consistent, and while Norris may still feel and may still be faster on his day, he's not putting it together when he needs to at the moment. And Piastri is just, if he leads out of turn 1, it's tough to beat this guy right now. And that's that's very high praise indeed. So Rosberg went as far to say that Norris needs a mental coach. I went through the same thing. From my point of view, you need to work on your minds. Now, Rosberg knows all too well. I think that Hamilton, obviously there's talk about Hamilton's current performances and all this type of stuff, but you got to understand that Hamilton, the drivers that he raced against in his career, he was a mentality lion, and I think still is with the right car. But you look at the fact that even to this day, Hamilton still lives kind of rent-free in Alonso's head. Button made very clear how challenging it was to be teammates with Hamilton. But even Bottas in recent years said how much it was affecting his mental health, even being in that team environment. Rosberg had to quit the sport because it got too much for him. And even Verstappen at the end of the 2021 season, I mean, it clearly took a lot out of him as well. So, there's certain drivers that are tough to deal with. And I think Rosberg knows a lot about the importance of mentality in sport. His comments on Russell or Norris, though, were very interesting. We'll get to Russell in a second. Because, and I've kind of been waiting for someone who has credibility to say this, because this has been my opinion for a long time, but, I'm just a fan at the end of the day, right? Like, I'm not a world champion. But Rosberg, this is his thoughts on Norris, right? And look, other world champions will disagree. Vettel had a different perspective on it. But you guys know my thoughts on this whole Norris thing. And this is what Rosberg says. If you say every day that I'm not good enough, at some point you will believe it. That's why I would strongly recommend that he reduces that, not always the negative. I think Rosberg, in my opinion, makes a very valid point. He said this to Sky Germany. I don't think the clip's even available anymore, but it's what Rosberg had to say, and made the argument that, look, if you're Lando, it's okay to be a little bit self-deprecating at times, to recognise your mistakes, let's say. But that can't be the primary motivation, right? I mean, there's this whole, fake it till you make it thing. There's a lot of psychology about this, and there's definitely some level of truth to it. That if you're going to play yourself down all the time and say you're not good enough, whatever, that is going to affect you. And there really is no doubt about that. Now, it's okay to still be critical, self-critical, in the way that Norris is. I think Rosberg's point is that it just can't be the primary thing that comes out. You've got to take the positives more than the negatives. And if Norris starts to do that, maybe he'll, have a bit of a turnaround in form. Just thought it was interesting that Rosberg said this, because there's been a lot of debate on this about Lando's approach over the last 12 months or so, really. But now it's finally becoming really relevant, because the championship challenge and title fight is right at his fingertips. And, why can't he execute? Look, his first lap record, as we know, starting from pole is not good enough, overstepping grid boxes, things like this are always a talking point. Vettel's perspective was different. He said that, look, it's nice to at least hear someone display their problems, to the public, which is fair enough. But, Rosberg looks at it through a champion's lens, and a champion who sacrificed a lot and worked hard on, his mental well-being and the mental capabilities that he had in a car and even outside of the car to get to where he did. So, thought that was an interesting aside. But let's talk about some of the drama with Russell and Verstappen, because this was a big talking point of the most recent weekends, because they crashed into each other again. Now, Russell had his time with Hamilton. It was not always cordial. I think their relationship was reasonably good between the pair of them. It got a little bit spicy at times between Russell and Hamilton, but generally their relationship was pretty strong. Russell even says that if anything, now they're no longer teammates, their relationship is actually somewhat better. We've got a good relationship, his company is appreciated. Russell certainly does not have a good relationship with Max Verstappen. I mean, it's been a couple of years now of drama. We saw what happened in Baku a couple of years ago. We saw what happened in Las Vegas a couple of years ago. And many other flare-ups, really, on occasion. Qatar last year was especially dramatic. And all of the, let's say, the interviews that came out after the fact, Russell saying how if anything doesn't go his way, he lashes out with anger and borderline violence, or whatever he said in that clip, which, of course, maybe you could argue aged rather well, based on what happened in Spain at the most recent weekends. But after what happened back in Spain, many people, including myself, are really just begging for more Russell Verstappen drama. Because you look at the title fight we had back in 2021, Hamilton versus Verstappen, even Horner versus Toto to some degree, it was not a friendly title fight, right? There was drama everywhere. You look at the title fight this season, it's likely going to be between Piastri and Norris in the two McLarens, and I think it will get a little spicy. We will get a little bit of that, but I don't think it's going to be, Hamilton-Rosberg, right? Maybe at some point, if McLaren keep dominating, that rivalry will turn sour. This is how it is. This is sport at the end of the day. But for now, Piastri and Norris seem, Norris doesn't seem like he has the killer instincts quite so much that maybe he would need. And Piastri is just so cool and, as I said earlier, unflappable that I don't, we are going to get a little bit between those two, but I don't think we're going to get anything like the title fight to the past, which has meant that some people are like, okay, maybe a title fight would be more entertaining if it were other drivers involved. And right now, the most exciting drivers that could possibly be involved in a title fight would be Russell and Max. It would be absolute fireworks every single weekend. Right now, they're occasionally fighting for a podium. But, Russell in the Mercedes is doing pretty well. Max in the Red Bull's also doing very well, given the context of where that car is this season. But if they were in the same car, if they were in different cars that were the same ability, or they could at least extract the same amount of performance of, it would be nothing short of spectacular, I'm sure. And Russell makes it very clear that he is not at all afraid. And this is what I like about Russell. Whatever you think, of his ability, what level he's at, as I say, I think Russell's pretty underrated. Do I think he's going to go down as a Hamilton, Senna, Prost, Schumacher, Fangio, Clark, Verstappen type character? No, but he's still very good. But as he says, at the end of 2021, Lewis was the hottest property on the grid. Nobody thought he could be beaten by a teammate at Mercedes. I came in and performed from the first race. The reputation he had is the same one that Max has now. Nobody thinks Max can be beaten, and that's exactly what people used to think about Lewis back then. Now, this is quite, a hot statement from Russell, right? He's like, yeah, I came into Mercedes, Hamilton was the best, and I beat him, right? I'm that guy. And I respect it heavily. I think this is how you have to think as a top-level driver. Whether he has the talent to back it up is always the debate, and I do think that the situation is a little bit more nuanced than that, in the sense that 21 to 22, brand new set of regulations, Mercedes tried something very different. Hamilton was very open, honest up front that he was, there were things he was working on the car. He was a bit of a guinea pig, really, while Mercedes were running all sorts of tests. That was probably less true at the time for Russell. There's a bit of nuance in the last few seasons, but there's no doubt that Russell did a very commendable job against Hamilton. The Max situation at Red Bull is probably a little different. The car is probably more extreme than it would have been at Mercedes, let's say. But also, I guess the argument could still apply that going into 2026, it is a brand new set of regulations. There could be opportunities for Red Bull to design a machine slightly differently to the way that they previously have done if they were to come alongside one another. If we look at the head-to-heads, by the way, we know that Hamilton did beat Russell in points scored based on the overtake at Abu Dhabi, famously, to get 697. Russell scored 695 while they were teammates, but the other head-to-heads were, usually very close. The final year was definitely stronger for Russell compared to Hamilton. The first year was stronger for Hamilton despite a very challenging start, and then it kind of turned around towards the end, and of course Russell won a couple of races during the period, so did Hamilton in 2024, but they were a pretty damn good partnership. The question for many is, okay, is this ever going to happen? Under what circumstances could this happen? Because Russell says, yeah, I'm not scared to race Max. I'll beat him at his team. I'll beat him at my team. I don't care. Now, Max is never going to Mercedes with Russell, I doubt. Antonelli ain't going anywhere. If Max goes to Merc, it's instead of Russell, more than likely. And wow, that would fire Russell up to his next team if they could be a championship challenger too, could you imagine? I think Russell's probably going to stay at Mercedes, though. I think Verstappen's probably going to stay at Red Bull. If Max were to go to Mercedes, then Russell would probably go to Red Bull, but there might be other opportunities as well. Aston Martin has been an interesting one that have potentially been throwing their hat in the ring for all of these drivers. But I think I'm just hopeful that at some point over the next couple of years, we actually do get this title fight somewhere. It's probably never going to be an intra-team fight. I doubt that Verstappen and Russell ever find themselves as teammates. It would be, you would just know. If you're the team boss putting that deal together, you just know what you're getting yourself in for. It would be chaos, it would cause drama, it would cause problems. So I don't think that's ever realistically going to happen. What's more likely, maybe, is that next year, Mercedes do a killer job. They nail the regulations, they integrate the engine well, McLaren drop off a little bit, Max is still at Red Bull, maybe goes to Aston, Newey does a great job cooking up with Honda, who knows. But if Max is there and Russell is there in competitive cars, it will be fireworks, and Russell says emphatically, my team, your team, any team, I don't care. I beat Hamilton, kind of, depends on what numbers you look at, and I can beat Verstappen too. Whether you believe it, I don't know, but frankly, who cares, right? The point of the matter is that it's strong words from George, and I think the rivalry has never been as strong as it is now. After what happened in Qatar, Abu Dhabi last year, it was definitely fireworks, but Verstappen gave Russell an excellent opportunity to bag on him again after last Grand Prix, and I'm sure that it's going to be a big talking point of this upcoming weekend at the media days and the driver press conferences, the way that whole situation was handled, and it will give even more fuel to the fire. So very much on Twitter your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.